name will forever be linked with our nation's response to the COVID pandemic. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, has a new memoir in which he discusses COVID-19, his recent congressional testimony, and more. Our Dr. Jon LaPook sat down with Dr. Fauci for a wide-ranging interview that'll air this weekend on CBS Sunday Morning. Dr. LaPook joins us now for a preview. So you've interviewed Dr. Fauci many times, I should say, over the years. What's different about this time?
Well, you know, there's been an arc to his career. I never went back to Brooklyn before and saw where he grew up. We talked not only about, obviously the recent COVID pandemic, but we went to Brooklyn. He went back. He was kind of was very sweet. He looked up at the pharmacy that his father used to own, that his parents owned. And he said, boy, it's looking a lot smaller than when I was a kid. He said, that's where my sister's room was. And, his father was a pharmacist. They called him Doc. And he gave out medications, but also advice. And I said, was he a good businessman? He said, no, he was a terrible businessman. He used to give away things, people would put it on credit, and then they would never end up paying him, much to the chagrin of Tony's sister and mother, because they were one of the last houses on the block to actually get a television set. But what it instilled in Tony was a sense of the importance of helping other people.
So you kind of got to see him on this very human level and go into his home. Did he kind of give you an insight, greater insight into what we can expect in that book?
Yeah, I mean, I've read the book. The book is terrific. It goes over the whole arc of his career. Remember, he was he was a shooting guard at 5'7" in Regis High School in Brooklyn, starting and captain of the team, which is amazing. And he'll talk about what ended his NBA career. He then went into science. He decided, NBA wasn't going to be in his future. And then you see his whole arc. More than 50 years. He's taken care. He's helped advise 7 presidents, and you see. Sort of, it's really interesting as he goes over the whole arc of his career to see the difference between the beginning of his career, when he was a very important person at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, because there was a lot of stigma involved and not a lot of people wanted to get involved with it. He was initially criticized by the AIDS activists because they were saying, there's not enough support from the government. And instead of saying, oh, I'm not going to listen to you, he actually invited them physically into the NIH. He sat down with them. He became an ally. He helped lobby the president and multiple presidents for funding, for national attention. And it ended up leading to a program that ended up saving more than around 25 million people estimated around the world. So that alone would have been enough. But throughout the years, you go with the arc of all the different epidemics. He had bird flu and H1N1 or swine flu, and then Ebola and Zika, and now COVID. And the difference between the beginning of the pandemic, the beginning of his career, and now is so stark, because at the beginning, there was friction with the AIDS activists, but then when the cameras were off, they were allies. Now it's gotten very, very personal, as we all know.
Yeah. And speaking of COVID, what was Dr. Fauci's role in helping develop the vaccine for it?
Well, a lot of people, say how Operation Warp Speed, which, by the way, was amazing that happened. You're able to get all these hundreds of millions of doses out so quickly. You have to give credit to the Trump administration. But the reason why there was even a vaccine in only 11 months was because of decades of research that Dr. Fauci helped make happen. Under Clinton, it was around the year 2000, he said, President Clinton said, how can I help with HIV and other things? And he said, well, we need a vaccine research center. We need a place where everybody can come together and be in one place, and we're going to be a lot more efficient that way. And in fact, they built that. Fade out, fade in. 20 years later, the technology had been developed. So when COVID-19 came along, they were able to, once they got the sequence of the virus, bam, they made, in 11 months or so, which is a record time, they actually were able to make the first vaccine. And then the Trump administration, with Operation Warp Speed, did something remarkable, which was they took a gamble and they said, you know what, let's just gamble that this vaccine is going to work. And so instead of waiting to make hundreds of millions of doses, let's just making it at risk. If the vaccine doesn't work, we're out a lot of money. And pharma went ahead and made it, and then it was a bet that paid off big time, because the vaccine did work. And the second we knew that it worked, bam, went right into the arms of hundreds of millions of people, as quickly as they were able to give it.
Yeah, and it's been 4 years since the onset of the COVID pandemic. Does Dr. Fauci still need a certain layer of protection?
Yeah, this is something that's just so hard to understand and accept, which is, for years now he's needed protection from people who are threatening his life. They're harassing his family. But for him, he's actually had at least 2 credible threats on his life, people who were caught on their way to kill him. It's just hard to comprehend that that's happening. But, I said, how does that make you feel? During the June 3rd hearings, when he was describing that, he actually choked up. And this is somebody who is in it for to try to help people. He was offered at a time when he was making several hundred thousands of dollars in his job at the NIH. He was offered millions to go to private equity or pharma. He said, no, I want to do something that helps people. And so he's devoted his entire career to trying to help other people. And now, the political climate is such that obviously we all know that the nation's very divided along political lines, and he's somebody who's become a target. It's very, very sad.
All right, Dr. LaPook, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing your story. You can watch Dr. Jon LaPook's interview with Dr. Fauci this weekend on CBS Sunday Morning.